In this video, we're considering the history of apologetics for the first 4 centuries as we move from Christian to Christendom, when Christianity becomes the predominant religious force in the Roman Empire. Now, most of the non-canonical writings until AD 125 were mostly focused on internal concerns, that is, establishing the Christian community rather than external apologetic concerns. In fact, the term Christian itself was probably used first in a pejorative way. Christians did not refer to themselves by that name until the 2nd century. The scandal of following Jesus is memorialized in one of the earliest depictions of a cross from a piece of graffiti art entitled The Graffito of Alexamenos. In the graffito, a man kneels at the foot of the cross, his arms extended in prayer, and on the cross is a man with the head of an ass. And the caption reads, "Alexamenos worships his God." The cross was such a symbol of shame in the ancient world that the very idea of God being crucified was tantamount to worshiping an ass. And the graffito embodies the sense of shame that early Christians had to bear through their allegiance to their crucified Lord. Thus, it's no surprise that from the 2nd to the 4th century, apologetics became, as Avery Dulles says, the most characteristic form of Christian writing. And the establishment of Christianity led to both political and religious apologies designed to win civil toleration for Christians as well as new converts to the faith. Now notice, Christians were still on the underside of history, without significant social and political power. They were charged with atheism, which was destructive to Roman society, as well as immorality and even cannibalism, which was a misunderstanding of the Lord's Supper. And they engaged in apologetics primarily in order to survive. Now let's talk about some of the 2nd century apologists. First, we have Aristides of Athens. And his Apology from 125 shows us one of the first examples of a religious apologetic. Aristides differentiated humanity into 5 categories: barbarians, Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and Christians. Christians, Aristides argues, surpass the rest because they worship one God, and their worship of one God results in a purity and modesty of life. Christians tell the truth, they show mutual love, and they have compassion even on their enemies. Now notice that the ultimate apologetic is an ethical argument. Christians propose a more exalted view of God than other religions tolerated by the empire. But the ultimate proof is this: look at the lives and unity of the Christians. Now, the most well-known of the early 2nd century apologists is Justin Martyr. Justin gives us an example of a political apology that was designed to win civil toleration. His first apology, written in 150, is directed to the emperor, and it argues that Christians should not be condemned simply for being Christians, but that civil magistrates should investigate whether they've actually done anything destructive to civil society. He argues that even if Christians are found to be foolish or misguided, they do not deserve the death penalty. Now, in his second apology, written in 160, Justin relates Christianity to pagan philosophy, and he makes a strange argument, an interesting argument, that pagan philosophers were able to attain the truth because they were somehow enlightened by the divine logos. They were, in some sense, Christians without knowing it. A third example of apologetics from the 2nd century is found in the letter to Diognetus. This letter is addressed to a civil magistrate, and it attempts to answer 3 questions that Diognetus is asking. And the apologist's answer is brilliant and beautiful in showing the Christian ideal. Here's what he writes: "For the Christians are distinguished from other men neither by country, nor language, nor the customs which they observe. For they neither inhabit cities of their own, nor employ a peculiar form of speech, nor lead a life which is marked out by any singularity. But, inhabiting Greek as well as barbarian cities, according as the lot of each of them has determined, and following the customs of the natives in respect to clothing, food, and the rest of their ordinary conduct, they display to us their wonderful and confessedly striking method of life. They dwell in their own countries, but simply as sojourners. As citizens, they share in all things with others, and yet endure all things as if foreigners. Every foreign land is to them as their native country, and every land of their birth as a land of strangers. They marry, as do all others. They beget children, but they do not destroy their offspring. They have a common table, but not a common bed. They are in the flesh, but they do not live after the flesh. They pass their days on earth, but they are citizens of heaven. They obey the prescribed laws and at the same time surpass the laws by their lives. They love all men and are persecuted by all. They are unknown and condemned. They are put to death and restored to life. They are poor, yet make many rich. They are in lack of all things, and yet abound in all. They are dishonored, and yet in their very dishonor are glorified. Now let's meet some apologists from the 3rd century. In the 3rd century, we begin to see more of what we saw in Justin Martyr's Second Apology, an attempt to navigate the relationship between Christianity and Greek philosophy. And different emphases are seen in different areas. In Alexandria, which is the heart of Greek philosophy, we see Clement and Origen attempting to combine Christian piety with the highest values of ancient culture. They're not hesitant to point out Greek errors, but they also, like Justin before them, highlight glimmers of truth, which they attribute again to divine inspiration, that God is at work in some way amidst pagan culture. For his part, Clement makes the argument that pagans are the real atheists, since they worship as divine things that are not divine. Do not deify the world, Clement says, but rather seek its creator. But building on love and music in the Greek tradition, Clement argues that Christ is the musician who imparts harmony to the universe and makes music to God. Like Orpheus, he tames the souls of men, drives out evil spirits, and restores health to the mind. Clement focuses on Christ, the incarnate Word, whom he sees at work in the depths of all humanity, leading each and all towards a moment of encounter with his personal presence. Note well, an encounter with his personal presence, not just an extracted truth. Now, Origen. In Contra Celsum, Origen takes on one of the most influential anti-Christian works of the time. He argues that Christianity does not undermine classical culture, but rather it fulfills it. With Origen, you also see the argument that the rapid propagation of Christianity, despite all efforts to destroy it, shows that there is a hand of divine blessing on it, and that if the empire were converted to Christianity, God would surround it with greater blessing. Here during the 3rd century, we see apologetics reaching maturity. They are no longer pleading for mere toleration. They are launching vigorous counter-offensives. They've mastered pagan philosophy, and they can speak as authorities in their own right. This summary from Avery Dulles. By their mighty synthesis, they inspire faith that the gospel can engender a wisdom more comprehensive and profound than any rival religion or any philosophy that does not rest on revelation. But there is a minority report from Carthage, Tertullian's Apology. While following in the familiar patterns of early apologists in the ethical defense of Christianity, Tertullian rejects any synthesis of Christianity with Greek philosophy. He says, "What has Jerusalem to do with Athens? After Jesus Christ, we have no need for speculation. After the gospel, no need for research." Or again, "The Son of God was crucified. I am not ashamed because man must needs be ashamed of it. And the Son of God died. It is by all means to be believed because it is absurd." Now, who does that sound like? I believe because it is absurd. This brings us to a perennial question for apologetics, and it's this: what is the relationship between philosophy and Christian faith, or between reason and faith? In any case, as we move into the 4th century, we see that in spite of attempts to revive paganism, it begins to become clear that paganism is fading as a vital religious option. This, of course, will be institutionalized with the Edict of Milan in 1313 and the conversion of Emperor Constantine. Thus, though there is plenty of theological development in the church during the 4th century, apologetics will shift to facilitate and to educate the conversion of Romans to the Christian faith. Nevertheless, Clement, Origen, and Tertullian represent the high watermark for Christian apologetics until the 5th century, when Christianity will receive a fresh impetus and a fresh challenge for faith, the fall of Rome. And to answer this challenge, Christianity will find its first great theologian, Augustine.